Okay, now this chapter on motivation, and have you ever wondered why somebody is motivated? You know, you have two people you have two people in the company, and one person is motivated, whereas the other person is not motivated. Or you often wonder why maybe your friend is more motivated than you, or you are more motivated than your friend. So by going through this chapter, we will learn about what is it that motivates people. And you can see that it can come from internally or it can come from externally. So the purpose of looking at the theories is really to understand better why is it that why some people are motivated and some people are less motivated, and also more importantly, what to do about it, how to make use of the theory to motivate people. So, because this is not an undergraduate course where you just learn the theory and that's it. The purpose of learning whatever theory is that so you have some tools to apply and hopefully to make somebody, first of all, to explain why somebody is not motivated, and then maybe to do something, to change something to make that person motivated. So what is motivation? Well, there are many definitions. It could be the process that account for an individual's intensity, direction, and persistence of effort towards attaining a goal. So you can see that there are actually three elements. It has to be intense. If it's not intense, that means the person is not motivated. Motivation must have a direction. You know, you must go towards something. And persistence. You know, being motivated means not giving up, despite whatever obstacles that are in your way. So these are the three key elements that exist in order to describe somebody as being motivated. Now, one of the earliest theories of motivation is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory. And what it is it can be best represented in this pyramid shape. And there are 5 needs that are arranged. By the way, Maslow is a psychologist, and he saw patients. So from his patients, he observed, or he concluded, that human beings generally have 5 sets of needs. And these needs are arranged in a particular hierarchy or particular order, starting from the bottom and working your way up. So the first level, the lowest level, is the physiological, not psychological, it's physiological, to do with the body. That's like, you know, the need for water, for air, for food. It's basically survival needs. The first thing human beings need to look at is to survive, really. So with most jobs, with the pay that we get, there's no problem here. Most places, most jobs around the world, there's no problem here. Now, once a person has fulfilled this need, then, according to Maslow, he or she goes to the next level of need, which is the safety. And at the time Maslow made this, came up with this theory, safety here, according to him, is job security, as well as safety from physical or psychological harm. But of course, nowadays, there's no such thing as job security for most people. Exceptions here and there, but for most people around the world, there's job security no longer exists. But people still look for safety from being harmed at work. So for example, if this building is not structurally sound, I probably wouldn't want to work here. Okay? So it's safety here. Now, having fulfilled this need, the person then goes to the next level, which is social. And social, as you know, that means having friends. In the West, it certainly means having friends. In the Eastern cultures or Middle East, perhaps is friends as well as family. Then the next level is esteem. Esteem is feeling good about yourself, like self-esteem, feeling good about yourself. So people will want to feel good about themselves after having met all these needs. That's the next thing that they want to have. And the last one is self-actualization. Self-actualization is, being the best that you can be. Whether as a lecturer, whether as a doctor, whether as a lawyer, whether as a mother or father. That's being the best that you can be. In the work context, physiological, you need enough money to survive, to eat and drink. You will also need to feel safe at work and also have enough money to buy a safe place to stay. Social at work, the work environment, according to Maslow, people come here also for social needs. They want to be able to have good co-workers that they can talk to and have a good time talking, conversing. Then the next level, when people work, they want to feel important when doing the work. The job must give them a sense of self-worth. And that's perhaps a little bit more difficult for managers to do, but it's still possible. Managers can give people, can give people better job titles, better nice sounding titles. Managers should praise the workers every now and then in order for them to feel good about themselves. So that's how managers can make use of esteem to motivate people. And lastly, the manager or the organization can design the job or can institute policies so that people are able to become the best that they can be. If the person wants to be the best lecturer or the best researcher in the world, or among the best researchers in the world, then organizations should provide resources, like in the form of training or in the form of databases, so that people can become the best that they can be. Right? So every level, in an organization, in a large organization, you find people at various levels, trying to meet the need that they are at. Assuming that perhaps not many people are here, or nobody is here, some people, they're working in quite dangerous environments. So what management can do is to give protective equipment and ensure that the premises is as safe as possible. Social, you sometimes have family days, parties at the end of the month. I know one university, they have they got to some dinner every week among their staff, and then esteem, congratulate each other. That's a way to boost up people's self-esteem and self-actualization, to find out, first of all, what is it that person wants to be good at, and then to give that person the resources and the support for them to be the best that they can be. So that's how Maslow is, and how you can use Maslow to motivate people. Now, with all theories in organizational behavior, including these motivation theories, you can make use of the theories, and that's why we learn them. But we must also understand the limitations, the possible objections or the limitations to the theory, because no theory is 100% correct. if there was a theory that's 100% correct, then you don't need to rely on any other theory. Because every theory has got some of its objections. So what are the possible objections to Maslow? What do you perhaps not agree with?
I think that in this case, some of the individuals that are sharing the two probably needs or motivations.
Yeah, that's good. According to Maslow, you only do one at a time, but as you said, as you correctly pointed out, for some people they might be struggling with two at the same time. Yeah, and they could be attempting to achieve two at the same time. Yeah.
Maybe
and also, what's another objection?
Maybe we can skip one like social.
Yeah. For some people, social is not important. So not all the needs are present. And for some people, maybe other needs are important. For example, somebody asked me, where's religion or spirituality here? So perhaps not all the needs are present, maybe other needs are present for other people. So this is just a generalization. In fact, I did one activity where I asked people individually what is it that they wanted. So the list was very different from here. But as I got them into groups and come up with a common list, as the groups got larger and larger, and as I combined smaller groups into larger groups, then their list was very close to this one. So it shows that, yes, at the individual level, yes, there are differences, but at the aggregate or group level, this one is fairly, well, as accurate as you can get. But nevertheless, the objections, some people want to achieve two needs at the same time. For some people, some needs are absent, like social. Some people are introverts, they don't need social. For some people, other needs might be relevant, and maybe the order might be different for some people. So these are the common objections to Maslow's theory. But still, having said that, I think overall is a useful tool, in that it makes sense. Somebody who is struggling to achieve the social need, you address that. If a person is not concerned or has already achieved the social need and is at self-actualization, then you focus on that. You're hitting the right frequency. That's the thing. If somebody is aiming for self-actualization and you're trying to motivate a person on physiological, it doesn't make sense. Or somebody on physiological, you're trying to motivate them on self-actualization, that's like you're missing the frequency. So that's the essence of Maslow. You find out which level or which need your subordinate is currently trying to fulfill, and then you fulfill that need. So that's what Maslow's theory. It's one of the earliest theories, very popularly discussed in management textbooks. Useful tool. Now there's another theory, and this one is more like a bit like perception, okay, and also a little bit like categorizing people into X and Y. Okay, there's a theory X. The theory X, the assumption is that employees dislike work, are lazy, dislike responsibility, and must be coerced. Coerced means forced, forced to perform. And there's another theory is that employees like work, are creative, seek responsibility, and can exercise self-direction. I've probably met people who are theory X, employees who are theory X, and I've also had the misfortune to have some theory X subordinates in the past. So I think both kinds of people exist. Now, with the theory Y subordinates, people who are creative, seek responsibility, how should you manage them? How should you treat them? Should you monitor them, tell them what to do, and scold them? No, right? You do that for theory X people. Monitor them, scold them, make sure they're doing the work. You do that for theory X people. But for theory Y, what do? You
give offers, maybe.
Yeah? What?
Motivate them.
Motivate them, encourage them,
Freedom.
give them the freedom, congratulate them on the work well done, you know, because these people, they like independence, and they don't abuse the independence, they don't abuse the freedom, you know? So that's how you should treat them. So when you have different kinds of employees, you should treat them differently, and that's how you apply this theory. Yeah? Theory Y people, you give them freedom, you encourage them. Theory X people, you have to set deadlines, you have to monitor them, you have to sometimes threaten them as well, because that's how they operate, that's how they are motivated. If you force them, then only they are motivated. Now there's also another side to that theory, what the manager's perception is. Now a manager could have the perception that all employees are theory Y people or all employees are theory X people. Do you think there's a potential problem? If a manager perceives that all the employees are theory X people, what would happen? He will start shouting at everyone, right? He will start monitoring, and then he will demotivate the ones who are theory Y. Huh? Okay?
Sure, but sometimes they can be like very white and they like.
Then you become.
They're not motivated. Then
Yeah,
they are
yes,
motivated.
yes, exactly. I've had an exact experience of that, where when I took on some subordinates, they have become theory X people. But I always, inside me, I knew that they were theory Y people. So I started treating them as if they're theory Y people, and they changed back to theory Y people. I had 3 subordinates, and 2 of them were actually originally theory Y people. So they reverted to theory Y behavior. But unfortunately, one of them was a theory X person, so he didn't change. So after giving them the freedom, I found that it did work. That 3rd person, I had to monitor that person. So that's the essence of good management. You have a slightly different, you individualize your style depending on the subordinate. Now, that's that theory. So you can see from each theory, it's slightly different things that you can take and use. So that's why we cover through so many of them, because there's no one theory that explains everything. Now this is another theory, is a 2-factor theory by Frederick Herzberg. And let me just show you this. Slide first, and I'll go backwards. Now, the traditional view was that people are either satisfied at one extreme, they're satisfied at one extreme, or they are dissatisfied at the other extreme, or they could be somewhere in between. But when Herzberg, he did a study on 200 engineers and accountants, and he asked, he and his co-researchers, he asked them, okay, what makes you satisfied at work? And what makes you dissatisfied at work? And he found that the respondents gave 2 categories of answers. So when they asked the respondents, what makes you satisfied at work? They said achievement, recognition, work itself, responsibility, advancement, and growth. But when you ask what makes you dissatisfied at work, then they said company policy, supervisor, work conditions, salary, relationship, and so on. So that's why we call it a 2-factor theory. It seems that there are two sets of factors, one responsible for satisfaction and motivation, and the other one responsible for dissatisfaction or demotivation. And notice, so basically there are 2 factors, and that's why we have this. According to Herzberg, the motivators like the achievement, advancement, growth, if you have them, people are satisfied. If you don't have them, there's no satisfaction, which is neutral. This is neutral. This is not dissatisfaction. It's a neutral state. Whereas hygiene factors like the work policy, the boss, the pay, according to Herzberg, if you have that, a good policy, a good boss, you are neutral. But if you have a bad, unfair policy, unfair boss, you become dissatisfied. That's the finding of Herzberg. And let's go back to this. So first of all, I mean, you probably are feeling that there's a lot of objections, there's a lot of things you don't agree. But really, if you were to apply this theory, how can you make use of this theory? Assuming that this is true, just first of all, before we talk about disagreement, let's just first of all assume that this is true. How would you then motivate workers?
Just focus on the motivation.
You can focus on the trying to motivate, right? So in other words, okay, you make use of this to just ensure that workers are not dissatisfied. Just make them neutral here. But you do not use these factors to motivate. You do not use work conditions to motivate people. You use itself, like you make the work more challenging, you give the person opportunity to grow. This is what motivates people. So you just take care of these factors, but you use these factors to motivate others. Yes?
Sometimes, for example, salary.
Yeah, okay. So that's how you use it. Okay? Now let's talk about objections. Okay? First of all, let's talk about where I agree with Herzberg. I agree with Herzberg on work conditions. I think work conditions are usually a source of dissatisfaction. Like for example, this room. Okay, if this room is too hot, you will complain, right? Or it's too cold, you will complain, right? But if it's just nice, are you really motivated? No, you're neutral. You're not unhappy. You're just neutral if the temperature is just right. Okay? Simply the chairs. If the chairs are really uncomfortable, yes, of course you're unhappy. But up to a certain point, once you have a reasonable level of comfort in the chair, by making the chair even more comfortable, will it motivate you? For most people, I would say not. As long as the chair is not uncomfortable, then it's sufficient. You don't have to, have the highest quality leather for your chair in order to motivate yourself. How do you motivate? You motivate using other things rather than work conditions, like in the room, the lighting, the chairs, the environment, and so on. Company policy and administration is also perhaps a bit like that. It's more a source of dissatisfaction rather than a source of satisfaction, as represented by the long bar over here and the short bar over there. So company policy and work conditions, I tend to agree with Herzberg that they're more hygiene factors. But yes, salary. And also here you can see that it's almost as long here compared to here. Salary supervision. Do you think that, okay, first of all, high pay, does it motivate people? Of course it motivates. Why else do you have these commission basis? Why else do you have bonuses for high performance if money doesn't motivate? Of course it motivates. Now the reason why Herzberg didn't find that out was because of this. He asked people, what makes you satisfied? Then they say, oh, the work is challenging. Remember, they're asking engineers and accountants, professionals. Right? So when they ask them, what makes you satisfied? They say, oh, it's challenging, intellectual, all that kind of thing. And what makes you dissatisfied? Then they start pointing outside. My boss, the company policy, my subordinate, everything outside, when they're blaming outside. So that's, human behavior, right? So that's why supervisor became like a hygiene factor. Whereas I feel also that having a good boss motivates you. In fact, I was once involved in a charity project, and I didn't get paid at all. But I was, I think, the most motivated because of the boss. The way that he talked to people, it was amazing. So yes, I think a good boss is also a good motivator. Money definitely is a motivator. These two things I strongly disagree with. They work both ways. Okay? Relationship with peers and subordinates, that's a bit well. It could be either way.
What means by status, doctor?
Yeah.
Status. What do you mean by?
Status, your ranking, in the organization, like your grade, your manager, senior manager, like professor, associate professor. They say these are just hygiene factors. But the thing is, you can, like I said, you can still make use of Herzberg because I agree with the work conditions and company policy, and I agree with these things to motivate. But I disagree that salary, according to Herzberg, is not a motivator. It is still a motivator, and bosses can also be a good motivator. So you need to know the limitations of Herzberg and how you can still apply Herzberg despite its limitations of Herzberg's theory. Right. No. There are other theories that follow from Herzberg, that came after Herzberg, and these theories more or less improve on the earlier theories. For example, ERG theories, existence, related entities, and growth. This theory attempts to improve Maslow's theory. This theory attempts to improve Maslow's theory. Remember when you said more than one need can be operative at the same time in the Maslow? You can perhaps, people could conceivably try to fulfill esteem and social needs at the same time. Well, according to ERG, you can. According to Maslow, you can't, but according to ERG, you can. So basically, ERG, they attempt to correct the objections or limitations of Maslow's theory. So another one, if high level need cannot be fulfilled, then the desire to satisfy a lower level need increases. According to Maslow, you go up and you get stuck. But ERG say you can go down. And it makes sense, right? Because sometimes people's financial situation, they go up and down, right? So one day you might be CEO, the next day you might be without a job. So, your needs can go up and down. And remember when we said Maslow, the lowest need was physiological, and then in most parts of the world, that's no longer relevant because you can achieve that. Well, this theory now focuses on the high level needs. So it just says that people, this theory came about when the economy was much better compared to when Maslow was doing before Maslow came up with that theory. So this time here, economy was much better and people were focusing on achievement, power, and affiliation. Affiliation is social. Power and achievement is like self-actualization. So these are just variations. Like I said, I think it's more important to know the earlier ones. Another one, a small theory here, it's goal setting theory. The theory that specific and difficult goals with feedback lead to higher performance. There was a research done among Harvard students at Harvard, and they found, basically they did research on students at Harvard University, and then 5 years later, they followed up these students when they were working, and they found that those students who, when they were at university, they had specific goals, like I will be in this position at this time. Those students with goals, when they examine them 5 years later, these students are at a higher level, doing better compared to students without goals. So they concluded that having goals is better than having no goals. So how do you make use of that? Well, managers can set specific and challenging goals to the subordinates, and that will motivate them to work harder. So, for example, like in universities, they say, you must have, the lecturers should publish at least 2 journals a year. That's the minimum, or you should go beyond that if you can, but minimum 2. And these goals that you set, they have to be specific, they have to be communicated, they have to be challenging, but not impossible. Then you will motivate people to work harder. Self-efficacy, just a term there. Individuals believe that he or she is capable of performing a task. Nothing needs to be said more about that. Okay, so that's okay. Now we have covered what you call the content theories of motivation. All the theories that we have covered so far, they are the content theories of motivation. And content theories talk about what motivates people. What motivates people. Now we're moving on to equity theory and expectancy theory. Equity theory and expectancy theory, they are what we call process theories of motivation, and the concern is how a person is motivated. The next 2 theories, they're very interesting for me. Right? Now, these next 2 theories, equity theory and expectancy theory, they are, again, quite large theories, and you need to know them. And the reason why you need to know them is because they have got widespread applicability. Like, for example, I've lost count of the number of times that I go in a lift, and of course, obviously not here, it's only 3 stories, but in Malaysia, when I go in a lift, it goes up to 6 stories and higher. I overhear people talking in the lift, and I lost count of the number of times when I heard somebody say something like this. I'm doing the same work as Mr. X or Mr. Y. I'm doing the same work as Mr. Y, but he's paid more than me. Or I'm being paid the same as Mr. X, but I'm doing all the work. So when I hear that, then I say to myself, aha, equity theory. Because that's what equity theory is. People compare themselves with others. And not only with others, they even compare themselves with themselves in the previous in a previous situation. So let's look at this. Individuals compare their job inputs and outcomes with those of others, and then respond to eliminate any inequities. They compare the inputs and outcomes. Inputs are what you put into the job. Inputs are what you put into the job. Example, your qualifications, your effort, what else? Your time, your creativity, all these things. And outcomes is what you get out of the job, like your pay. What else do you get out of the job?
Bonus.
Okay, pay, bonus, remuneration. Any non-financial things you get out of the job?
Appreciation.
Appreciation sometimes. Sometimes experience as well. When if experience is valuable, that is something that you could measure. So every person compare the inputs and outcomes and those with those of others and then respond to eliminate any inequities. I'll come back to this in a moment. So you compare, and we talk about ratios. So we're not saying that everyone in the company should be paid equally. Not everyone in this university should be paid equally. The provost should be paid differently from like the secretary. Okay? And why is it that the provost should be paid differently than the secretary? Because responsibility, right? Responsibility, the qualification. It's not easy to become a provost. You need like years and years of hard work and proving yourself, your experience, all that to become the provost. So, so we're not talking about equality. Equality is everyone is paid the same, but equity is like the ratio of outcomes and inputs, that the ratio is equal. So when you have equity equal, then you have equity. And you could have equity of being over-rewarded or equity of being under-rewarded. Now, I think we're all more familiar with inequity due to being under-rewarded, we complain. And that's quite common. But there is also a potential to perceive inequity due to being overpaid, according to this theory. But this theory also says that the motivation here is less compared to here. So when somebody is feeling underpaid, what would they do?
You will not be motivated and they will stop.
They will stop or they will work less hard. Okay, so that's the consequence of being under-rewarded. What about being over-rewarded? Well, some people will not do anything. They will say, I'm lucky person, I'm lucky and that's it. But what could a person possibly do? Be over-rewarded. Motivated to work harder, yeah. Because I think in today's situation, today's economic situation, if you yourself perceive that you're overpaid, you better do something about it. You better prove your worth, prove your pay before somebody else, like your boss, says they're overpaid, and that will be a disaster. So you should work harder to justify your pay. I would now want to go backwards to this slide, the portion which I missed deliberately. I want to explain that one first, then come here. Now, who do we compare ourselves with? Like I said, we can compare ourselves with other people, that's very common, but we can also compare ourselves with ourselves. Okay? Now, self inside, self outside, other inside, other outside. Okay? So self and self here, you're comparing with yourself. Other and other here, you're comparing yourself with other people. Okay? Now what is inside and outside? Okay, now self inside is inside the same organization, and outside is outside that organization. So inside outside refers to the organization, and inside outside here also refers to the organization. The self refers to self, other is you're comparing with other people. Let me give you some more examples. Self inside. Just say, for example, I'm a lecturer now, a faculty member, associate professor, and then say suddenly I became a director of research in ADU. So it's still in ADU, but from being a lecturer to a director of research. Now I will be comparing my role and the money I get in my capacity as a director compared to the money and the role that I had as a lecturer. Now if the new job is I have to work 7 days a week, 20 hours a day, the new job, and I'm paid like 400 dirhams more. Okay? Would I feel that I'm getting a better deal being a director, or most likely, if I'm just looking at pay and hours, I'm not looking at prestige and all that, I'm just looking at pay and hours, I would say that the new position is not as good as the old one. So I'm comparing myself with myself in the same organization, old job, new job, in the same organization. Now outside is if I change to another university in anywhere else in the world, and I will be comparing my new job with the job that I had in EDU. Or like for example, I could be comparing my current job here in EDU with my former job in Malaysia. It's still myself with myself, but in different organizations. And whenever you feel you're underpaid, then you feel restless. You feel overpaid, then you might work harder, or you feel it's fair, then you stay where you are. Other insight, you tell me, you're comparing yourself with another person where? Inside the same organization. Co-worker. Okay? So I can compare, it doesn't have to be another lecturer. Yeah, I can compare myself, I could compare myself with the provost even, but obviously I don't expect to be paid more than him, or the same as him, but the ratios have to be equal. So I could compare myself with anyone else in EDU, or I could compare myself with any other lecturers anywhere around the world, or any other, any other manager even around the world. So that's a referral comparison. We all make these comparisons, and we try to get the best deal for ourselves. That's human beings. That's we are like financial maximizers. We want to have the best deal, not necessarily the highest pay full stop, but highest pay compared to what we are giving back. So the inputs, you match the outcomes to the inputs. So as I mentioned earlier, if you perceive that you are underpaid, what are the things that could happen? Well, you could reduce your work. If you perceive you're overpaid, you might increase your output. You might also realize that you are comparing, or you're making inappropriate comparisons. So you change, you choose a different referral person, or maybe you are too unrealistic in your perception of yourself or perception of other people, in which case you distort in order to maintain equilibrium in your mind, so that you are not upset. But honestly, if you still feel that you are underpaid, and you know that you are underpaid, then you will quit the job eventually. So that's why it's important for HR managers to ensure that the pay is equitable in the organization. The aim is not to achieve equality, but the aim is to achieve equity. That people's incomes are comparable, reasonable, taking into account what they input into the organization. And if you can delete this is a misleading and confusing slide. This one can be deleted. Yes?
I have a question.
Okay.
It's like,
So according to expectancy theory, there are three conditions which must exist in order for a person to feel motivated. And if any one of these conditions are not met, or any one or more of these conditions are not met, then the person is not motivated. The first one is that the effort to performance relationship. That means a person must believe that if they put in the effort, they will be able to achieve the performance standard required. The second one is, if the person achieves the performance standard required, they will get the rewards. And the third one, the rewards are something that you value, or the rewards are worth the effort that you put in. The strength of this theory is that it not only explains why somebody is not motivated, it also explains how to motivate somebody. Yeah? So for example, the first one, effort to performance relationship. When we say do not set impossible tasks, do not set impossible goals. Yeah? So how to apply that? How to make use of it? Well, you set challenging but achievable goals. Yeah? If the goals are challenging, well, you need to make it possible for them to achieve the goals. Not necessarily by lowering the standard, but sometimes giving the training, giving the support, so that they can achieve the goals. Or sometimes these people just need a confidence booster. You know, it's a lot about belief. You know, a lot of people they believe that they can't do something, but actually they can. And perhaps words of encouragement, persistent encouragement gives them the motivation to do that. Okay, now next one is performance and reward relationship. You know, it's established that if you promise somebody a reward if they do something, and then they do that, but you don't give the reward, they will be demotivated in the future. So how can you correct that? I mean, how can you prevent that?
Don't promise if you're done.
Yeah, don't promise whatever you cannot deliver. Right? Don't make promises you can't deliver. Okay? Or be careful about what condition your promise. Make your conditions very clear. Right? And lastly, the rewards person goals relationship. Well, understand once again, just like Maslow, understand that different people like different things. Some people they prefer freedom. Some people don't want freedom. Some people they like titles. Some people don't like titles. So you need to make sure that the positives are more than the negatives. What you give to that person, you give the person what they want, and you don't make it like too difficult. So there shouldn't be too many negatives to take away the joy of having what that person wants. Yeah? So first of all, you take time to know your subordinates. What is it that they want, and then you give them what they want, and make sure that there's not too many negative conditions or too many difficult or onerous tasks that you give that person. And when you take care of that, you'll find that people are motivated. So the next time that any member of your family is not motivated to do something, apply this, and you can diagnose why that person is not motivated. And if it's like, for example, this one, for example, like your child, they think that they are not intelligent, that's why they can't get a high grade. Well, I mean, you should give them the encouragement, you should give them the support so that they can learn. All individuals can learn, all individuals can achieve. Just need the necessary support. And once you promise something, you have to deliver. Don't if you promise that if they get how many A's, you will give them the toy that they want. If they get it, you better give them the toy. Otherwise, they will not believe you in the future. Motivation is just one of the three conditions for performance. There's also ability, like intellectual ability or physical ability, and there's also opportunity, whether you are well connected or not. But having said that, I think motivation is something within your control. Intellectual ability is not really within your control. Some people are lucky to be born in certain families where they have got the connections. Not much you can do about opportunity, but motivation is where you can do something about it. And you don't need to know this. It's just combining all the theories into one. And like I said, no one theory explains everything. So you need a combination of theories to explain why a person is not motivated or how a person can be motivated.